I am Jerry Page. I am with Jerry Brueggemann, and he's going to share a little bit about himself and his experiences being part of the LGBT growing up. So thank you again, Jerry, for allowing me to interview you. But go ahead and kind of start with your earliest memory and when and where you were born.
Okay. Basically, I was born in Fairbury, Nebraska. I grew up on a farm in a town called Western, Nebraska. And I was one of five children, four boys and the one girl. And I'm the only gay one. And my earliest memory of knowing something was different was when I was about 10 years old. And from that point on, I just knew that I didn't belong with the rest of the guys, with their talking about the girls and this and that. And when I was 13, I had my first experience. It was with an older man. Yeah, then I knew I was okay.
When you were born?
Oh, what year? 1952.
1952. Right.
I'm an old one.
Is there anything else you would like to share on that? You mentioned being 10, and then 13 was your first experience. How was it like growing up once you realized at age of 10 and after that going
Well,
to school?
you felt you were different, from the rest of the boys. And I couldn't put my finger on it at first. But then afterwards, when you have your first experience and then you go out and you have more experiences with other guys, maybe that have a curious side to them, or maybe that they are, gay too. And all through high school, I ran into a few here and there. And my first love was in college. And he wanted me to marry him, run off and get married. And back in the 70s, that was kind of unheard of. And so I turned him down. And since I met him in later life, I'm glad I did. Sure did change. I haven't, but he did. But anyway, I've had three other major experiences. I was married to a woman who passed away. I have two grown daughters that support me in the gay community. They says that, Dad, we want you to be happy, and if this is what makes you happy, then that's what we want. And my my three experiences were two that cheated on me and broke my heart. And then the third one was he thought I should pay for everything. And it just wasn't what I thought a relationship should be.
Growing up, how did people react to finding out you were gay, or did they ever find out on that? What was that?
Some found out,
Uh-huh.
and so the majority of them didn't want nothing to do with me. There was a few that said, "Hey, you're still my friend," and that's kind of the way it went all through my life. Sometimes when you make a pass at somebody and they're not gay, they you know they they either point you out to the rest of the crowd, or they don't know how to respond to me, and so they're scared. And there's a lot of the guys that they are curious, even married curious out there. And some of them do leave their wives, but the majority of them stay with their wives even though they're gay. My my growing up, when I got married, is the reason I got married is because I wanted children, offspring. And back in when I got married in 1972, that was a time when you couldn't adopt, if you were gay. And so therefore the only way I knew I could get them was to have a wife. And I did have a good wife. I got to admit that. She understood at the end when she passed.
Was it just illegal for gays to adopt, or was it just really frowned upon on that?
Well, I think it was both.
Oh.
You have that feeling that, well, we don't want them to turn our kids into, gays or lesbians, so therefore they thought, well, they can't be a parent to a child. And yeah, it was looked down upon. And I believe it was even illegal at the time. And so therefore I got married.
What notices have you seen and within society and within the LGBT community from when you were growing up compared to today, or even just within a few years? What kind of changes have you noticed?
Well, I feel that the changes have been for the best. I see where people are accepted now. Um, Maybe not so much the fact that, they would show emotions in public, but that they would, whatever goes on behind closed doors goes behind closed doors. And I think that's kind of the attitude that they have nowadays, that, they're not, they're not discriminated against as much as they would have been way back when I was growing up. That just was a no-no to know somebody that was gay. And there was a lot of gays back then that killed themselves because they thought it was wrong, that they were the bad seed.
No, it sounds like a tough time. Absolutely.
It was.
And
It definitely was.
what kind of things would you say to someone who is just afraid to come out and doesn't want to just yet? Or what kind of advice would you give them?
Well, first off, when I came out to my parents, I was 55 years old. And I'm going to tell you the story that my wife, when she found out that I was gay, she says, I want to tell your parents. And I says, I think it's my place to tell my parents. She says, but are you going to? And I says, yes, I will. So I went over to my parents' house and they knew something was, that I needed to say, but I didn't know how to say it. And my mother said to me, she was already in tears. She says, Jerry, come on, tell us what you want to tell us. And I says, Mom, I'm gay. And she says, I always knew you were different than the rest of the boys, but I never said anything. And my dad looked at me and I thought, being a German, that he'd probably want to put me before the firing squad. But he said to me, you are my son and you will always be my son, regardless. And I was so relieved and such a weight lifted off my shoulders that I knew that I could be myself now and I didn't have to hide it. That if somebody did find out, so what? My folks already knew. So you're not going to hurt me. And I just feel like, today's gays, there are some that get discriminated against yet. And that's something we all have to work for. But it's less than what it was when I grew up.
You today, and we have different apps of for the LGBT to meet others. How was it with you with meeting? Did it was just somebody like, oh, they look nice, and you just, took a chance and went up to them, or was there a certain place that everybody went to that just kind of knew was like the hangout for the LGBT, or a mix of both?
Well, there was a mix of both, really. I mean, if somebody, you might have been up and talked to them, and you just kind of had that spark, that feeling that everything was good between you, and then something happened or it didn't happen, one or the other. But the fact that how do I want to say this? Basically, we have a lot better understanding of what gay and lesbian is now than when I was growing up. It was kind of like a plague back then, and you're bad. But now it's more of it's okay. But it's one thing to show respect, and that's to those people around you, that if they're not gay, that you don't flaunt your gayness to them. And you'll be more accepted by far if you don't have that, oh yeah, effect. Just be yourself.
What else would you like to share?
Okay, when the AIDS, virus, I guess you call it, was out there, it scared a lot of people. Well, a lot of us lost friends, and that was hard. It was just kind of like that we were plagued to be that way, so that we're going to clean them out this way. And thank God they found a treatment, for AIDS. And I really respect the government for doing that, because they sure could have let it go the other way. And I think they've realized that we are people too. And that's one thing you have to realize in your life, that everybody has a purpose, and everybody has the chance to be loved. And whether it's good or bad, you can learn through those bad ones too, and what characteristics that you really care for and want in your life. You know, when you're in a bad situation where it could be that someone is being, abusive to you, then get out. Don't stay there. You're a fool if you stay there. You need to be out and be loved.
What was it like trying to find the right church for you?
Well, okay, the church that I grew up in was against gays and said they were going to hell. And I serve a loving God, one who cares for everyone, not just certain people. And so I knew I had to find a church that was welcoming and understood the Bible the way I understood the Bible. And I found that. And that was in the ELCA Lutheran Church. And it's a funny thing. One of my organist friends, because I just turned 50 years of playing the organ, and he says, church would be awful quiet if they knew a lot of the organists were gay.
Wow.
So
You've been at the same church for 50 years then? Um,
I no, it was I've been I was raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, and when I became about 1922, somewhere in there, I left the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, because I knew I wasn't damned to hell,
mm,
that I served a loving God. And so I searched for a church that I thought I could be comfortable with, and that's the ELCA Lutheran Church. They're very welcoming. So is the Methodist Church to the gays, and the Unitarians. I think a lot of the other ones are coming around too, the Presbyterians and so forth, but it's just taken a little longer. And I think more of the younger pastors are more open to it than the older ones, because they were taught, hey, don't go there. And I had a pastor that I served under that was, once a year, he had a hell and damnation thing on gay and lesbians. And finally, I couldn't take it anymore. And I just told him, I says, you've got it all wrong. He says, oh, no, I don't. And I says, well, then you serve a different God than I serve. And that was the end of my playing at that church.
wow. You mentioned going to college. When was that, and what college, and what was the life like at college, and being part of the LGBT and having your first love?
Okay. Um, I went to Peru State College, which is in Peru, Nebraska. I majored in music and a minor in English. And it was a totally different experience. And, everybody told me, they says, you can't wait till you get to college, because you're going to experience a lot of different things. I thought, yeah, right, sure. Uh-huh. And yeah, you do. And, there are even meeting places for gays and lesbians, and it's not secret or anything like that. And we just know that we met on a certain night, at the cafeteria or something like that, and we ate together and visited and stuff like that. And some of us paired off, and some of us went our way. It's just whatever. And my first love was in college. And like I said, he wanted to marry me, but I wasn't ready yet. And that would have been something really new
Mhm.
in Nebraska. It wasn't even until a few years ago that it was legal in Nebraska.
Absolutely. Um, Especially with President Obama during his presidency when Congress wrote up the law for same-sex marriage and that
Right.
going past. Absolutely, and I think that was maybe 2015. So definitely very, very recent on that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so, and how did you feel about that passing? Did you find like that was a big win for LGBT? Did you have any
Oh,
particular
yeah.
feeling towards that in particular?
Yeah. Even though I'm not a Democrat, I was glad that he, did it for us because it was another step in the gay community where we won. We had a chance to be like everybody else. And, there was some churches that would not allow their pastor to marry same-sex marriages. And so they couldn't do it, even though they agreed with it. Um, so, we always could go to the judge, and get married. And I stood up for my cousin here about 5 months ago for his same-sex marriage, and his mother wouldn't stand up for him because her belief is going to hell. And I told her, I says, "You've got it all wrong." And she goes, "No, I don't." And I says, "Well, that's your belief. My belief's different. And I believe we're okay. We're in a God loving, place."
When did you graduate uh, from college with your major in music and minor in English?
I started in the fall of 71. And in 75, I think it was, I graduated. And that was right before the Vietnam War quit or somewhere in that vicinity, because my number was the next number to be called to go. And it was a big whew,
No.
that I didn't have to serve.
So and that's for the draft of they had your number. What was
Yeah.
that like? What was your feelings towards that being that you knew your number was the next one? For example, how did you know your number was the next one? What was that
Okay.
process like?
Well, they had a lottery.
Okay.
And then the lottery, they had numbers, and they were at 127 and 128's the next one, and that's what I had. And when they called off the war, that would have been if it went on, I would have been the next one called up, and I would have had to serve.
And so it was 129 would have been your next number, and that represents your birth date, January.
I don't know if there's just numbers that they do a lottery. I don't understand how it really went. It was just that I was sent a letter and they said my number was 128, and if it was to be called, that I would have to report
Okay.
because the draft, went to a lottery after a while.
Mm. Oh,
And I honestly can't tell you anything more than that.
do you have plans in place if your number did come up? Did you have a plan of what you were going to do and how that was going to work out?
Yeah, I took a test in high school that said, well, that what I would be good at if I was served in the service, in the army or whatever. And mine was going to be more into electronics and that type from how I scored. And I really found that kind of strange because I thought, electronics. And because I knew I wouldn't be able to go for infantry because I can't shoot a gun right. Um, growing up, my dad took me out with a shotgun and he says, "Now get that rabbit there by the tree." And I blew the bark off the tree. And my dad says, "What the hell were you doing?" And he goes, yeah, rabbit was over there. And I says, no, there was two rabbits. There was one by the tree where I shot and one over there. He goes, oh, there's something wrong with you. So took me home and he told my mom, he says, take him to the eye doctor. There's something wrong with him. So I knew that I would never be able to be in infantry, but I did, get to be like I would have been in electronics because of the tests that I'd taken.
I appreciate your time and on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.